Because today, after quite a delay, House Republican leaders say they actually want to subpoena the individuals you see on your screen, but they certainly delayed issuing any subpoenas. They announced this a while back and now finally signed it. And what you see looks like a smorgasbord of spreading blame around. The Clintons, former attorneys general, Robert Mueller, why is he in there? No one knows. Barr, who actually was attorney general, overseeing the DOJ and the Bureau of Prisons when Epstein died and when, of course, those videos disappeared. The committee also says they'll subpoena the DOJ for the documents, which Donald Trump and his allies and Pam Bondi claimed they would release and never did. On the DOJ side, they're discussing whether to release audio from their unusual interview with the Epstein conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell. One of the oddities, and victims' families say hypocrisies, of this entire Republican obsession is that so far the main thing that's happened within the Justice Department is leniency for Maxwell going to an easier prison. So Republicans are trying to use the subpoenas to feed headlines that they might want to get to the bottom of this, but they delayed signing them, and they have subpoenaed individuals like Mueller to kind of make a mockery of the whole thing. Now, here is how it's playing out in red states.
Why are you covering up the Epstein files?
We're joined by New York Times Magazine writer Emily Bazelon. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
I mentioned first the suspicious timing. I mean, there's so much here, but we know how it works. So sometimes our job is to make sure we tell viewers why we're seeing headlines. If you go on the internet right now, you see Republicans subpoena all these people. But why did it take so long for Comer, for example, to even sign these subpoenas?
I mean, one can imagine that he was hoping, and Republicans are hoping, that the story was going to die, right? Because Trump wants to put it to rest, has made that very clear. He's very impatient with his supporters who are insisting that they want more information. And it hasn't died. Republicans keep hearing about it from their constituents, and they made a decision that, as a result, they had to respond in some way. I think that list that you put on the screen shows that they are trying to put as much of the blame of this as possible on former Democratic officials. There are only 2 Republicans, or maybe sort of ish 3 if you count Bob Mueller, on that screen. And, you know, why subpoena former President Bill Clinton and not people who were more directly involved in the last Trump administration, other than Barr and Sessions, the attorneys general from the first Trump administration?
Right. The list is incredibly unserious and untargeted, which makes it look like, to the very end, even after all this, a lot of Republicans see this as content farming, political content, rather than dealing with the real questions. There are questions surrounding his suspicious death and the secrecy. There's questions around his original sweetheart deal, which survivor and women's advocates have talked about on this program and others for a long time. I want to go back, if we cared about the substance, to the prosecutor, Alex Acosta, who's not subpoenaed, but cut the original sweetheart deal that was so controversial. This was back in 2008. I'm reading from Axios. He reached what they call this non-prosecution agreement. So Epstein had basically fake time. And it ended what was a federal probe that could have stretched farther, we know, because later it did. If you cared about getting to the bottom of not only this, but you say, okay, the guy's dead, but other people who might be getting away with things, if you're concerned about sex trafficking and the mistreatment of women and girls, isn't this someone you'd want to talk to?
Yeah, for sure. I think you would want to talk to Alex Acosta, who was the federal prosecutor right in the middle of this. And you might want to talk to other people in the Justice Department who had some kind of oversight over those decisions at the time, instead of Hillary Clinton, for example.
Yeah. As for Trump's relationship with Epstein, this was a person who was, as the subpoenas reference, a high-flying individual. So the fact that he consorted in business or even socially with various people is not evidence of a crime. We have a much higher rigorous standard. But Trump has tried to tell this story that has got himself tied up in knots where, oh, maybe he knew enough or had enough of a falling out. Maybe he didn't know the really bad stuff, but he knew some bad stuff, so he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. That's the story. Well, new headline from the Daily Beast, Epstein was still a member of Trump's Mar-a-Lago long after indictment. The revelation Epstein was allegedly still a member of the club 7 years after they used this term poached. You could use different terms, hired away or kidnapped, right? sex trafficked this victim from the spa at Mar-a-Lago in 2000. They say raises questions over Trump's, quote, version of events. It's a 7-year gap. Do things like this, again, without presupposing anyone's guilt, but do things like this add evidence to why Trump might be so secretive about all these files?
I mean, sure, because the timing suggests that actually his relationship or some involvement of Epstein lasted longer into the time period covered by the indictment of Epstein, right? I mean, that's a crucial part of this picture. And who knows what exactly was going on. But also this whole idea that someone, quote, stole a person who was working as a masseuse at Mar-a-Lago, that she was a victim or could have been a victim of some of Epstein's sex crimes. That's also super fishy and makes you wonder what exactly the folks at Mar-a-Lago knew about what was happening. Just that word stole is such a strange word to use in this context. And yet that was what Trump said.
So if he knew more then, what does that actually do? Not just legally, where we've all been reminded presidents aren't prosecuted in office no matter what you find, but what does it mean in the wider spectrum where life is unpredictable? That's why reading the news can be interesting, because you actually find, gosh, who knew that would have been the thing? But here we are in August after a lot of Trump scandals and problems, self-dealing, crypto.
The Epstein story that won't go away.
And Lisa, I think it's just in the last hour the Giuffre family put out a statement, and they want to know whether or not what happened to the victims is going to be taken into account. Mm-hmm. 2 lawyers who represent other Epstein victims are accusing the DOJ of violating the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Mm-hmm. What's the concern?
The concern is sort of twofold. One, as the Giuffre family has pointed out, if these folks are going to get together and talk about which documents should be released, why is a victim's representative not at the table? Their statement today says not only should the administration take the victims' feelings and experiences into account, but they need to bring the victims' voices effectively into the room where it happens. With respect to the Crime Victims' Rights Act, you and I have talked about this before. That is a law that requires the Department of Justice to notify known victims when certain court proceedings are taking place. The government represented in its filings in the motion to unseal grand jury testimony that it had notified those victims who were mentioned in the grand jury transcripts, but far from all known victims of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who by the DOJ's own account number over 1,000. So that lawyer that you were referring to, Brad Edwards, said in a letter to the court, we need to change this process before you even decide whether or not to release these transcripts. Force them to notify everyone who is affected here. Give those folks time to have their voices heard by you. And to the extent that you're going to release the information, allow victims' lawyers into that process so that they can review the redactions proposed by the government, because there isn't trust there that the government knows how to sufficiently protect the information, identifying details, names of the victims here.
So, Kristen, the letter from the lawyer of those multiple victims argues that they've already endured violations of their rights and dignity, writing this about the potential release of the transcripts. To now compound their trauma by sidelining them from critical decisions, especially in this climate of heightened concern, is inconsistent with both the letter and the spirit of CVRA. You've represented sexual abuse victims. How much weight do you think a judge generally does give to victims' needs, requests, versus other considerations in making a ruling like this?
I think it depends on the judge, but to answer your question, they should give a lot of weight, right? Because when you're talking about the justice system, particularly the criminal justice system, you're supposed to represent the entirety of the community. That includes the defendant, but it also includes the survivors. And I think in this particular case, it's important to note that the survivors aren't opposing the release of these records. They're asking for respect. These letters show grief, they show betrayal, they show fear, all wrapped in a demand for basic human dignity. They're not saying don't release the files, they're saying don't release us with them. They're just asking for that private dignity. They're asking for, as Lisa pointed out, you know, some type of notification to all of the victims, but also maybe a third party arbitrator, a neutral person who can go through the files and then maybe potentially re-notify individuals who weren't notified initially or were notified without full notification under the CVRA. So they're just demanding transparency, but not really at the cost of their safety or sanity or re-victimization. And I think that's really important to note. And the judge should weigh that heavily.
And then, Eugene, there's this other part of it that Monica brought up. You know, President Trump was confronted about Ghislaine Maxwell's transfer to the lowest security facility, a prison camp. And he gave an answer that was very similar. We've been hearing from him more and more, and you're going to hear it in these two clips.
Were you aware of and did you personally approve the prison transfer for Ghislaine Maxwell that your Justice Department?
I didn't know about it at all. No, I read about it just like you did.
Do you support the Justice Department seeking a new interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, and did you urge the Attorney General to seek one?
I don't know anything about it. They're going to what? Meet her?
They're going to. Your Deputy Attorney General is reached out to Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney asking for a new interview.
Yeah, I don't know about it, but I think it's something that sounds appropriate to do.
He didn't know he wasn't involved. Do you hear that as a political statement, a legal statement, or just I'm not keeping up on the details statement? How do you hear that? Because we have heard it repeatedly now in the course of this ever-expanding controversy.
Look, let me know in the comments. I want you to write in the comments, every single one of you. Do you believe Maxwell when she said that she clears Trump of any wrongdoing? I don't. Many people have said that she's been caught lying before. There were perjury charges against her. I don't think she was ever convicted of those charges. I think they were sort of carved out from the much more serious ones, obviously, that she ended up being convicted for. But some people have suggested that she's lied before about what she knew and what she didn't know, or who did what, or who didn't do what, or what have you. And look, the motivations are clear for Trump to bury this. But here's the thing. Maxwell has him over a barrel. Trump has done this stuff before. It's kind of ironic. It's sort of a karmic smack to the face, right? Where Trump has sort of trapped people before. Where it's like, okay, I'm not gonna go at you, but now I own you because I could. And often in these cases, the person he's talking about did do something likely illegal. And Trump's like, I'm not going to, now that I'm back in charge of the DOJ or whatnot, I'm not going to press charges against you, or I'm going to stall the charges. But those charges could still hit. But they won't as long as you do my bidding. But this one's different now, because now it's like, if Trump doesn't do Maxwell's bidding, if, for example, she gets sent to a rougher prison again, or she doesn't end up getting that pardon, or doesn't end up getting a reduced sentence, or whatever the deal was, quote unquote, decided behind the scenes allegedly, then now she can always change her mind. And if that happens, Donald's going to look bad, because I'm going to be honest, no one's believing this, guys. No one. Everyone knows that what Maxwell is doing is saving her own behind. Either she was directed specifically to do it, that's what some people are saying, or others are saying that it doesn't even need to be said, but she and her team sort of think, again, this is speculation, that you can lessen your time in jail by just saying Trump didn't do anything wrong, and then Trump will reward you because you helped get some heat off his back. In any case, though, now she owns the president.